Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Millcreek Government Channel. I'm Jessica Stutzman. Medicinal plants have been used for centuries, but today, most of these beneficial herbs are now considered weeds that are found growing right in your very own backyard. Joining us today to talk about a series of hands-on medicinal herbal workshops being offered through the Tom Ridge Environmental Center is the clinical registered herbalist and educator for the classes, Leslie Alexander. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Jessica, thanks so much for having me.
Well, the first thing I want to talk about, because this is a very neat and different and interesting topic, what was the catalyst that sparked your interest in beginning to practice with medicinal herbs?
There are so many plants around us that over the years people have used for healing, for emotional well-being as well as physical well-being, and increasingly we have come to rely more and more on the pharmaceutical industry. So plant medicine is really the people's medicine. It's free, and many of the plants that, as you just said, are available to us in our own backyards, growing wild in the wonderful landscape around us. So my interest has developed over the years.
And what is your particular educational background that maybe led into your training as a certified herbalist?
So I originally completed a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Science. So I've had a long-standing interest in the earth and the effects of pollution, and particularly pollution on our health and well-being, as well as the health of the earth. And then I went overseas in 1984 and completed graduate work at Heriot-Watt University in Scotland, where my work focused on stressors affecting plants. From there was a very natural progression into looking at how environmental stressors affect our health. A field of research and education called environmental epidemiology. And then after several years of practice and a peripheral, casual, growing interest in herbs, and particularly medicinal herbs, I began studying in a more focused way, and then I decided to pursue clinical training. So in 2005, I think, I left academia, returned to the States, and undertook a clinical educational program under a registered herbalist who now is the director of the Arbor Vitae School of Herbalism in Manhattan, Richard Mendelbaum. And I've been practicing ever since here in the States.
And so how do you keep on top of or keep current with, maybe any new trends or any new research that's coming out with the herbs, or are there associations you're involved with that keep you up to date?
Absolutely. So I am a board member of the American Herbalist Guild, which is the only national organization here in the States. We have a public program for people who have a passing or indeed very focused interest in medicinal and culinary herbs. We also have a student program, and then we oversee professional registration. So the letters after my name, registered herbalist, are distinct from other types of practice, I suppose. It suggests a level of peer review and a certain proficiency and hours of clinical practice. So there's the Guild, which keeps us up to date, and we have an educational program which is open to the public and also Guild members. So anyone who is interested in that could go to the AmericanHerbalistGuild.com website and check out what programs are there. I'm also a member of the American Academy for Oral and Systemic Health, and that might seem kind of far-reaching from my life as a herbalist, but I have a particular interest in the health of the mouth. The mouth is linked to the rest of the body, and can very grossly affect our health. So with a local registered hygienist, Linda Straub-Bruce, in 2004, our first book was published, Dental Herbalism, Natural Therapies for the Mouth. So the oral systemics, the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health is a great resource for the mouth. And then the ABC, the American Botanical Council, keeps us up to date on research trends, new evidence. And while there's a lot of new things to learn, I think it's important when we look at the use of herbs currently and historically, that we realize that this is not a new phenomenon. Herbs have been around for millennia. In India, for example, we have records dating back 5,000 years, and in Japan and China, dating back more than 3,000 years. So there's a huge wealth of what I suppose could now be called experiential evidence, pointing to the safety and the efficacy and the reliability of herbs as medicine.
Mm-hmm. And when we touch on, the medicinal herbs and maybe even things growing in our backyard, what comes to mind might be some things that I have found in my own backyard, and I had to Google. I saw a plant leaf and I thought, man, this, first of all, it smells good. It smelled like mint to me. And it actually turned out to be lemon balm in my backyard, growing wild and growing, quite large in my backyard. But I found out that it was good for repelling mosquitoes and things like that. So that's what I always think of. I don't know what our viewers think, but that's what I think of when I hear, backyard herbs. Can you give some examples of what we might find in Pennsylvania, or maybe specifically in Erie in our own backyard?
Oh, there are so many plants here in Erie. It is an absolute delight to live here. So all along the bayfront, up above the Bayfront Parkway, we have cottonwoods, which have been used as anti-inflammatories and antispasmodics, and the bark has been used to control pain. Most people tend to focus on all the cotton that's coming through the air, and I focus on the buds and the bark. So they're everywhere. Throughout Frontier Park these last few weeks, people may have smelt that really lovely, sweet smell of linden, tilia, which is also called a lime tree here. So that's a heart herb. Not just in terms of physical well-being, but also spiritual well-being. Lemon balm, as you mentioned, is also an antiviral and is specific for things like herpes simplex virus. And then if we look down in the grass, why we can see creeping Charlie and plantain, and we can see purslane and lavender. I mean, it's a cornucopia of medicine. And as long as we're collecting these medicinals from areas which have not been treated with chemicals, which are away from the road, and also when we're really clear that of the plant ID, these are safe sources of medicine. Right.
Well, and I'm sure, again, like plant life can very much mimic each other to survive. And so you don't want to, either ingest something or put something on your skin that you think is one plant and really is something else. So, and I'm just curious, with some of them, there would be topical, some of them you might add, into your tea or something like that. Are those the two main uses for herbs?
Oh, certainly those are two uses. And we can use herbs topically by simply chewing them up and putting them on our skin directly, or we can infuse them in oils to create an oil which is then used topically. We can extract them in water, like you said, as a tea, or in alcohol or vinegar. Many people who use herbal vinegars on their tables when using salad, for example, eating salad. Those are medicinal preparations, but in very low doses, as compared to a tincture, which we could use at a much higher dose.
Okay. And then, like you said, the holistic herbal approach to life, it's, to me, this all-encompassing, you think of a very, like I said, a very holistic approach when you think of using herbs. And I don't like to use chemicals if I can really help it. So when I found the lemon balm in my backyard, of course, my first instinct was to Google it and then to rub it on my skin to repel mosquitoes. So, but it can, it can be safe and it can create a balance in your life. What are some of the historic and maybe current day benefits of using them?
Of using herbs? Well, I mean, almost 80% of the pharmaceuticals that are on the market now were derived from plants. And there are many, from aspirin to digitalis to vancomycin. The list is huge. So plants are safer than many pharmaceuticals when used appropriately. And appropriately means within a particular dosing regime. And as you were just saying, there are a variety of ways that we can use herbs topically or internally. We need to know the part of the plant to use, and to pay particular attention to interactions, not just with pharmaceuticals, which may seem the most obvious, but also with other plants, with foods, with allergies. So historically, plants were the people's medicine. That was where we went. And whether you look at indigenous cultures here in the United States or abroad, it's very striking to see that similar plants from the same family are used to address pain or alleviate muscle spasm or promote an appetite or,
And I think it's really interesting. I just took away from what you just said the fact that you may be using the leaf, or you may be using the bark, or you may be using the bud. So you actually, it is very much more research-based. You may not always be using the leaf. It may be a different part of the tree or of the plant.
Exactly. There are some plants where, for example, we only use one part. But then if we look at the ubiquitous dandelion, why we use the flower and the leaf and the root, and each of those parts have a different effect on the body. So knowing which part is hugely important. And
so these workshops that you're going to hold at the Tom Ridge Environmental Center, you've been holding them for years at TREC. Which is down at the mouth of Presque Isle, but your workshops are being held, and we've already missed a few this summer, but by the time our viewers watch this, we'll be able to catch the tail end of the series of your workshops. So why don't you touch on what the workshop titles are, and then I'd like to dive into each one specifically and get a better summary.
Absolutely. So TREC has a hugely broad and interesting educational program, which last year they expanded to include local herbs, medicinal herbs. So I'm pleased and honored to be a part of that program. Coming up, we have a weed walk, I think. That's when we go outside and look at plants that are growing around the center. We have
going around the Tom Ridge Environmental Center itself, around the building?
Well, some are around the building and have been planted. And then we walk casually around the edge of the grounds, exploring and talking about plants, touching and tasting and smelling. and talking about how they're used and how they can be used safely.
And what do you see, again, just between the different maybe smells of the plants? Again, I first noticed the lemon balm because it smelled so good in my backyard. I thought it was a weed at first, and I went to go take it out, and I said, this smelled phenomenal. It smells like mint almost, but you know, how do they differ in smells?
Oh, they differ hugely. And lemon balm, which is a member of the mint family, so it's not surprising it smells like mint. Many plants don't give off an aroma or won't give off an aroma while they're dry, but when we bruise the bark or we bruise the leaf or the flower, like lavender, sometimes you can walk by a lavender bush or a rosemary bush and not pick up a scent, but when you bend down and you touch the leaf, there are different scents. So scents vary enormously. Yeah.
And what else do you see on your walk? Do you involve, I know that we mentioned that they might draw, your attendees to the workshops might draw some of the plants, or is that how they help with identification? Sometimes.
I mean, many people come because there is a growing interest in how to work with plants in our region. So people are interested in identifying plants. One of the things that comes as a result of the workshops, I think, is people perhaps walk more gently on the earth, because there is a wealth of material underneath our feet that they were hitherto unaware of. So they walk more gently. We practice identification. Sometimes we make drinks. Sometimes we make poultices, topical applications. We taste a lot of things. Yeah.
And you also have a class coming up called Pamper Me Please with Herbs. And you said this helps deal with some stress and anxiety. What can we look forward to in that class?
We'll be looking at a variety of different interventions and approaches to dealing with stress and anxiety. So some people may find, for example, that both stress and anxiety keep them awake at night. So we'll be looking at ways we can use herbs to support a healthy sleep pattern. Some people may experience stress and anxiety as muscle tension. So we'll be looking at ways we can safely and inexpensively, and often with things that we find at home or in a kitchen, can reduce stress and anxiety.
Oh, okay. And what I picture, like you said, with sleep, I do have a nice essential oil lavender spray that I'll spray on the pillow. And is lavender a big one, a part of this particular program?
So lavender is certainly one of the herbs that we use. But Jessica, I'm not a big fan of essential oils. First off, when we look at that teeny tiny bottle of essential oil, it encompasses acres of plant material. And from an environmental or a sustainability point of view, it raises a lot of questions in terms of like the growing popularity of essential oils.
Right, they are growing very popular.
Yeah, everybody uses essential oils. And it is also a very concentrated way of delivering a herb to the body.
Okay.
So yes, we are looking at things like sleep pillows perhaps, or...
And what's a sleep pillow?
A sleep pillow might be, well, it might simply be a sock that's filled with rice or filled with barley or even cherry pits, and then to which we add herbs and we close it up. And sometimes we can warm it, and the aroma as well, the aroma both hot and cold promotes a more restful sleep. So that's just one example.
Okay, and I also want to talk about, and you said it was one of your particular favorite things to talk about, was the Maritime Medicinal History. Can you dive into that a little bit for us? That was a bad pun again, but I keep using that one by accident. But could you just touch on the maritime history of medicinal herbs?
Absolutely. So when ships left port, they left with a crew, and it was really important, whether that was a leisure ship or a military ship, a fighting ship, or even a whaling ship, that the crew remained healthy. And prior to pharmaceuticals and the pharmaceutical industry, people relied on plants. So every ship had a medicine chest, and the contents of those chests were governed by perhaps where a physician was trained or where a captain was trained, about where the boat left or set sail from, the ports it called into as it would restock its medicine chest. So it's a very interesting and exciting area to look at how plants traveled aboard ship and how they were used to support and sustain the crew's health.
And what type of herbs, if you can pick any off the top of your head, were used in maritime history specifically?
Oh, there are literally hundreds, some of which are quite striking. So, for example, well, when sailors were homesick, some ships would carry a conserve of rose petals. So ground up rose petals mixed with sugar, sugar being a preservative, and preservation was key aboard a ship. A ship could be at sea for months, or whaling ships for years. Mm-hmm. And this rose petal conserve would be fed to sailors to lift their spirits because they were away from family and friends for a really long while. Mm-hmm. Conversely, many people have heard of scurvy, and scurvy results from a deficiency in vitamin C. And one of the effects of scurvy is lethargy, inflammation throughout the body, and huge fatigue. So, as you might imagine, carrying lemons and limes wasn't an easy thing to do if you were setting sail from Nova Scotia. And if a ship was at sea for a long period, those fruits would rot. So we needed to find ways to bring vitamin C aboard a ship, and that can be done through plants like creeping Charlie. Its Latin name is Glecoma hederaceae. It can be done through, again, sugar extracts of citrus. Mm-hmm. So there's a variety of ways.
And you have 2 other workshops, and we are running out of time, so I want to make sure our viewers know how to sign up for the workshops. We have one called Fire Cider, another one called Herbal Gifts, which I think is great. That's going to be held in November, so I think right in time for the holiday season. So in your classes, attendees may walk out with, again, some gifts or some products. So are there fees for the classes through TREC?
So fees basically cover supplies. Mm-hmm. And yes, I think with the exception of the weed walks, which are open to the public and no one need register, mm-hmm. all the other classes require a pre-registration. Mm-hmm. Classes are held on Saturdays, and registration closes Thursday evenings. Mm-hmm. And that can be done through the Go Native site, mm-hmm. or people can call Tom Ridge directly. Okay, and then those things that they're going to walk away with, again, it's the herbs, or it might be those herbal pillows that you talked about. Any other products that you've made in your class that you want to mention? Oh, we've made fire cider, we've made vinegars, we've made tinctures, we've made teas. Mm-hmm. I would say that it is the exception that people would not leave with something. Most people leave with a workshop with something that they can bring home and continue to use. Well, I think that's fantastic, and this is going to give them something that they can, a skill that they can go home and maybe continue after the fact. Or like I said, you've been holding these classes with TREC for quite some time, so if they, get a taste of your workshops, they can always come back for more. Absolutely. Okay, so just to say one more time how our viewers can sign up for classes. Well, if anyone needs in-depth information, they can go to my website, mm-hmm. www.restorationherbs.com. And there's also information on the Go Native Erie site. I think there's a link from the Prescott Isle site, from the Tom Ridge site, or they can call Beth McLaughlin at Tom Ridge directly.
That's fantastic. Is there anything you want to share with our viewers? Our time's just about up, but something that you want to share with our viewers that they should take away from the program today?
Well, I hope that everyone takes time to look at medicinal herbs. They're all around us, and they are safe and effective and very cost affordable when it comes to supporting our health and wellness.
Leslie, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate it. Your knowledge of herbs and medicinal herbs is quite vast. So again, people are going to want to attend your workshop and pick your brain a little bit more than I was able to today.
Thanks for having me, Jessica.
Viewers, again, you have so many herbs and natural remedies and plants in your very own backyard you may not even know about. So make sure that you attend these herbalist lecture series at the Tom Ridge Environmental Center. And thank you for tuning into the Millcreek Government Channel. Until next time, have a wonderful day.
You're watching the Millcreek Government Channel, powered by WQLN Public Media.